Good morning, and thank you for coming, willing to listen to my story. It's not a pleasant one, but it's a very true story. I have no reason to exaggerate. I'm not an actor. I was there. I was in hell. Believe you me, hell it was. I know it's hard to believe. My own children had difficulties to comprehend or to believe even. I lived in New York for many years. I didn't talk about it. I realized after a while that most people are not able to comprehend or to believe. But coming to Oregon about 16 years ago, I was approached by the Oregon Holocaust Research Center based in Portland, and they asked me to share my story. I was very hesitant. I have an accent. My English is not perfect, but I gave it a chance. And my first presentation was at Century High School in Hillsboro. A week later, the teacher gave me about 100 letters from the students. What did they write to me? Mr. Wiener, you saved my life. You changed my life. You made me appreciate my school, my parents, and so on and so on. Then I realized that I'm doing something important. And that is one of the main reasons, the feedback that I've been getting, that I'm making an effort. It's not easy, emotionally. When I talk about it, I see images. It's not easy physically. I'm 90 years old. But again, if you read the 88,000 letters that I received so far from people all over, or if you read my book, you'll realize the impact that my presentation had on so many lives. It's amazing. If you read my book, on page 158, you'll see a handwritten letter by an 8th grader that she was suicidal. She intended to kill herself on Thursday. She left a note with her grandparents, and then when she heard my story, she changed her mind. She realized that her problems are so trivial in comparison to my problems at her age, and she did not kill herself. I have over 120 letters. I have 88,000 letters, but 120 letters pertain just to suicide. So apparently, it has a very positive impact. Why did I write my book? I had no intention to write a book. I didn't feel qualified to write a book. I didn't feel the need for it. I was busy rebuilding my life. But in one of the churches in Vancouver, at the end of my presentation, an older man approached me with tears in his eyes, and that is what he told me. Mr. Wiener, I heard your story this morning. Please promise me in front of the church that you are going to put your story in print. Do it for my children and for my grandchildren. He broke down and he told the story to the church that he's a World War II veteran, and he was one of the liberators of Buchenwald, which is a very infamous camp in Germany. And he remembers what he saw. So he really broke down, and I promised him that I'm going to put it in print. And when I thought about it, eventually I agreed. I was thinking about the title for the book. What is going to be the title? So it came to the conclusion that from a name to a number, because you are going to hear me later, in one of the camps, they took away from me everything personal. And they gave me a number, 64735, and they never called me with my name again. So, and apparently it is a good book, because if you go to Amazon, Amazon has 54 million books, and they are evaluating every day how well rated the book is. And this morning, my book was rated 98 out of 54 million. So there must be something important in that book. And apparently people like it, because the other day I went to a church in Albany, a Mormon church. There are about 1,000 people. And one of the young ladies stands up and she says, Mr. Wiener, I took you to bed for 2 nights. Then you took me to bed for 2 nights? I don't remember even one night. Is my memory so bad? Mr. Wiener, I went to bed with your book, not with you. So I told her, I'm glad that you recognize, but you don't talk about those things in a church. But the mere fact that she felt how important that book was in her life is very gratifying to me. And again, if you go to Amazon, people write book reviews and say what they say. Even this morning, somebody posted a review, and I don't know those people. They just read a book, and they found it to help them. It is very sad that so many people in the United States, which life is relatively so good, that people are so pessimistic. And when they read my book, it gives them hope. One of the things in my book that can give you hope, or to give anybody hope, is a fact that happened to me. In February 1945, I was so weak, I couldn't work anymore. And the way the system worked, if you cannot work, you are useless, so they kill you. But there was no crematorium in that camp, Waldenburg, which I told you later, so they sent me to a killing center. And I was standing in line. I saw the chimney. I felt the offensive odor of burning flesh. I was so scared. And all of a sudden, a German entrepreneur approached my line, and he shouted at me, "Come on raus, Knabe, du kannst doch bei der Arbeit kapieren. Get out of that line, young boy, you can still work." And he sent me back to work. And a few weeks later, I was liberated. The point here is, you never know. Never give up hope. The Russian doctors who liberated me told me if I live 2 years, it's going to be a miracle. And here I am at the age of 90. This was in 1945. So you never know. That is my point. You never give up hope. So I do share my story, as mentioned before, and the responses are amazing, amazing. When I read those letters, sometimes it breaks my heart. A young girl cuts herself because she's unhappy. I have those letters all the time, and that is the main reason that I'm here. The second reason is that there are people who are completely ignorant about the Holocaust. The other day, a teacher asked me to make him a copy how I looked after the war. So I went to Kinko's to make a copy. So the young man who I asked him to help me because I didn't know how to operate a copy machine, looked at the picture and looked at me and said, "This you?" I said, "Yeah. You don't look like a criminal." I said, "I'm not a criminal. I'm a Holocaust survivor." He had no idea what I was talking about. I was shocked. And he was born right here in Portland. The third reason that I'm here is because there are people who deny the Holocaust. Even prominent people like the president of Iran, Ahmadinejad, he said in the United Nations 3 years ago that the Holocaust is a myth. How dare he say so? How does anybody dare to deny the Holocaust? I'm here, and there are some others who are carrying the physical and mental scars, and they claim it didn't happen? You have no idea how painful it is. When my book came out, the first copy in 2007, I sent it to the president of Iran. And as long as he was president, I sent him every year, I sent him pictures. No other event in history has been so well documented as World War II, mainly because of the advent of photography and recording. And somebody tells you it didn't happen? So I sent him pictures. And in the last letter I sent him when he was still president, I attached a copy of the check that I've been getting from Germany every month. I don't know how many of you are aware that those who survived had a chance to submit a claim in 1953, so many years ago, not as compensation, but as a gesture of goodwill. They call it Wiedergutmachung, and they try to compensate in some way financially to those who. So I made a copy of the check, and I sent it to the president of Iran, and I asked him a simple question. If there was no Holocaust, why do the Germans send me a check every month and not to you? No, it's ridiculous to say it didn't happen. There are 100 museums, Holocaust museums just in the United States. And there are so many museums with exhibits taken by Germans while they committed those atrocities. Somebody tells you it didn't happen? Doesn't make sense. So I gave you the reasons why I wrote that book. And again, it's apparently a good book. I don't care if you buy it because I committed myself not to make any profit of it. But it's a good book that I indicated how well it is rated. And then it's available in all the public libraries. So, as I said, I never talked about it, but coming here I do, and I mentioned that the responses that I'm getting. And it is very interesting how people respond. And I'll give you something which happened very recently, which is not in my book. One day I got a telephone call from Michigan University, and somebody introduced themselves. My name is Norman Weiss. My father was the commander in one of the camps that you were incarcerated. I'm calling you, I'm a professor teaching German literature. I'm calling you and asking you your forgiveness. And I told him, there's nothing for me to forgive you. I don't blame you. I don't blame you for your father. You are not responsible for your father. And that is the way I feel. We were on the phone for half an hour, and I tried to convince him that I don't hate him because what his father did to me. And that is the way I feel. I know when you look at this picture and you look at me, you wonder, is this the same person? It is. I'm here 18 and a half years old. My total weight was 80 pounds. 80 pounds. I could embrace my tie with one hand. So you can imagine what kind of condition I was. What you see in the middle of my head, in that particular camp, they shaved us every few weeks to be recognized if one of us contemplated to run away. This is another picture of me when I was 14 years old, during the war. As you can see, I'm wearing the star, the armband to the Star of David. This is the only picture that I have from my childhood. A neighbor of mine took that picture, I was not aware, and she gave me that picture after the war. She survived the Holocaust and she gave me the picture. This is the only picture that I have from my childhood. As I mentioned before, at one point, the Germans stripped me naked, took away from me everything personal. I don't even have a birth certificate. And they gave me a uniform consisting on a jacket, trousers, no underwear, a shirt, a cap, a coat, and a number. They never called me by my name again. Can you imagine to what extent you are dehumanized if you don't have a first name, a last name, just a number? Who am I? Where do I come from? I come from a little town called Chrzanów. Don't try to pronounce it because I'm not able to. A little town, 22,000 population, half Jewish, half Roman Catholic. As a little kid, I had a pretty normal life. I didn't have any of the conveniences that you take for granted today. I did not have as a child. We didn't have even running water. Needless to say, we didn't have an air conditioner, a refrigerator, a car, a television. It didn't exist. But it was a beautiful life. The older I get, the more appreciative I am. Just to give you an idea, the kind of culture or environment that I come from. I had to go to see my grandparents every weekend, to walk 1.5 miles to say hi, to show them my love. They never gave me a toy or a game. They couldn't afford it. It wasn't available. But this was my responsibility to show them my love for them. On New Year's Eve, I had to knock at the door 24 tenants in our building and wish everybody a Happy New Year. This was my responsibility. We had a homeless person, sometimes 2 or 3, at our supper table, and we were brought up to respect those homeless people. We called them our guests. I went to a public school in the morning and to a religious school in the afternoon, 6 days a week. And all this came to an end on September 1st, 1939, when the German army invaded Poland. And as you see, this little town is very close to the German border. So people try to get away from the border. How do you get away? Nobody in my little town had a car. I know for an Oregonian or Washingtonian, I know there are a few people here from Washington State, that nobody had a car. Didn't exist. So those who wanted to get away from the border took personal belongings on the back and walked into the interior of Poland. And those who could afford, they hired a coachman with a horse-drawn wagon and tried to get away. Excuse me. And that is what my father did. He hired somebody, and we did try to get away from the border. When I say we, it is my stepmother. My mother died when I was 4 years old. I do not remember her. My older brother, myself, my younger brother. My father couldn't join us because the Polish retreating army gave him an order: you stay put, because we need the groceries from your business. So he couldn't join us, but we managed to get away about 40 miles. Took a long time. All the roads, they clogged with refugees. And eventually, when we did reach that location, which was called Dąbrowa, the hometown of my stepmother, the Germans caught up with us. So basically, we didn't accomplish anything by trying to avoid the Germans. The Polish army was no match to the mighty, mighty German forces, and as you know, Poland was occupied in a very short time. But we were stuck at that location for 3 months. We couldn't go back home. There were no means of transportation. Eventually, when we did get back home, we found our apartment looted, and my father, that we left him behind, wasn't there. Any place that we inquired, nobody had an answer. Eventually, they came to us from the Judenrat, which was the local committee, and they told my stepmother, something which I'll never forget. We know that your husband is missing, but we also know that at the outskirts of our town, there's a pit of victims thrown in by the Germans. If you would like to know whether your husband is one of those victims, we are going tomorrow morning to open that pit in order to identify those victims. What apparently happened, the Germans picked up at random 38 people in our town, mostly Jews, some Christians, and they shot them. They shot them not to be killed instantly, they shot them to bleed, to suffer until they expired, and then they threw them into a pit, not in a normal fashion, the way you throw in stones. There's a concept in the German culture which is called Schadenfreude. You are enjoying yourself, entertaining yourself, watching other people suffering and dying, because the other people, they are inferior. They have to be eliminated. What about and this happened on September 11, 1939, a very infamous day. And if somebody is murdered on September 11, and we tried to identify those bodies 3 months later, it was very difficult. The bodies were partially decomposed, and in those days we didn't have DNA. It was very difficult to identify. My stepmother did manage to identify my father's body by the certain items that he had in his clothing that she was familiar with, like a handkerchief or a comb. I was at that point 13 years old. You can imagine what kind of traumatic experience it was for me at such tender age. I have nightmares till this very day, even though this happened so many years ago, looking at my father's decomposed face. I was devastated. It is only after the war that the Polish government erected that monument. It is in the Hebrew language. My father is number 23. 10 have never been identified. And this is the official document from the Polish government that I received after the war, that my father was murdered on 11 Wrzesień, which in Polish means September 1939. So life was very, very difficult. To prepare the mass grave for those victims took a long time. We didn't have earth-moving machinery that you used to see today. People volunteered to prepare mass graves for those 38 victims. And I was standing next to my father's casket for hours, as a little boy, talking to him, crying, praying, asking him a simple question. Daddy, why did they kill you? What have you done? I didn't understand it. I didn't understand it at the age of 13, and believe you me that I don't understand it at the age of 90 that I'm today. Why did they murder my father? He didn't do anything wrong. I was devastated. So every day the Germans issued new orders to make our life miserable. One of the very first orders was that our little town became a ghetto, which basically means segregation. And I couldn't go to school anymore. My formal education ended at the age of 13. I couldn't go to school. Even I happened to like school, a Jew couldn't go to school. But there are a lot of limitations of our movements and the quality of life. But there was no mass murder in 1939 and 1940 as it started later on. But in 1941, in the middle of the night, the Germans knocked at the door and they took my older brother away. Once they took away somebody, there was no contact. He couldn't call, he couldn't write. We had no idea what happened to him. 1 year later, in June 1942, in the middle of the night, the Germans burst into our apartment. They looked at me. They didn't ask my age. They just told me in the German language, you have 3 minutes to get ready. My stepmother pleaded with the German. He's such a young boy. He's 15 years old. He needs a mother. I love that boy. Have mercy. What did the Germans do? They slapped on her face. You dare to question our action? And they took me away. I never had a chance to say goodbye to my stepmother and to my younger brother. What did the Germans do with me? They put me into a wagon like that. Maybe some of you had seen documentaries like Schindler's List, The Pianist, and you could see a wagon like that. But picture yourself the conditions in that boxcar or whatever. 80 people of different ages were pushed into that car. Nothing to eat, nothing to drink for a day and a half. Do you hear me? Nothing to drink, nothing to eat for a day and a half. We were all standing all the time. There was no room where to sit. One of us did die. There was no room where to fall. There are no words in the dictionary to describe the terrible conditions in that car. After a day and a half, I arrived in my first slave labor camp called Blechhammer in Germany. Upon arrival, I was beaten for no reason. But then something unexpected happened. One of the prisoners in that camp recognized me from my hometown, told me, do you know that your brother is in this camp? So he took me to meet my brother. I did not recognize my own brother. Not seeing him for 1 year, he aged 10 years, like an old man. It is one of the most traumatic experiences in my life that I could not recognize my own brother. Why did he deteriorate to such an extent that I couldn't recognize him? Just to give you an idea, the conditions in those camps. Just an idea, because time doesn't permit to go into much detail. 24 people of different ages were housed in a very small room, 8 by 10. 8 by 10 is a very small room. And there were 3 bunks, 8 bunks, 3 bunks and 8 walls, 24 people. No mattresses, just straw infested with roaches and lice. They gave us 2 slices of bread in the morning, and the bread was made out mostly of sawdust. Sawdust. It wouldn't be edible to any person who has more or less a normal life. But we have no choice. Lunch, we never got lunch. And that evening, coming back after a long day of hard work, they gave us a soup, which was very diluted. If you found a potato or another vegetable, you are very lucky. So obviously, people were dying on starvation constantly. According to my reading, 15 million people died on starvation, including 4 million Russian prisoners of war. And to die on starvation is a very painful way to die from. Any other way to die from is easier than starvation. Why? Because after a day or two, the body eats itself. It's very, very painful. I experienced starvation, and I know from my experience how painful it is. So my brother was very pleased that we are going to be together, but on the other hand, he was very concerned, how will I be able to endure those terrible conditions that he already had experienced for 1 year? At the very first day marching to work, I learned something which is extremely important. I appreciate that you are attentive, I can see, but I would like you to remember that. Please remember that. I had the impression that only me, because I happened to be a Jewish boy, that I was oppressed. But marching to work, I saw so many different groups going to the same place. Who were they? Jehovah's Witnesses, gypsies, homosexuals, undesirables. Maybe 30, 40 different groups are being oppressed to a certain extent the way I was oppressed. What did I learn? Every Jew was a victim, but not every victim was a Jew. Please remember that. Every Jew was a victim, but not every victim was a Jew. It is my personal conviction. If Hitler would have won the war, you and you wouldn't be sitting here in a free society. Hitler had a plan. Heute Deutschland, morgen über alles. Today we are in Germany. Tomorrow we shall be everywhere. You are not a pure-blooded German. I'm going to enslave you. And if I feel like, I'm going to annihilate you. This is very well documented. Read about it, and you will see how lucky we all are that Hitler did not win the war. What do you see here? This is a German woman. But she didn't have blue eyes and blonde hair. They measured her scalp to be sure that she is pure, pure, pure German or Aryan blood. Does this make sense to you? To determine somebody's ability or character based on the color of the hair, or the color of the eye, or the color of the skin? If you have an open mind, you will come to the same conclusion, that prejudice and stereotyping is absurd. You know, Voltaire, the 18th century French philosopher, said, those who can make you believe absurdities can make you commit atrocities. It's a German woman. The more you think about it, you'll come to the same conclusion. I was in that camp, Blechhammer, only for 2 months, and then for 4 months, and then the Germans decided to send me to another camp called Brande, also in Germany. The conditions were very similar in all those camps, same kind of food, shelter, and so on, and hard work. But the commander in that camp was such a sadist that he enjoyed torturing us. This was his enjoyment. And one night he took me and many others, pushing us into a cold bathroom, forcing us to be standing there underneath a cold shower for the entire night. What I mentioned before about the German professor in Michigan University, this was the son of that camp, the commander on that camp. But a sadist, he enjoyed torturing us. Anyway, I was in that camp only for 2 months. I have a very nice souvenir from that camp. 2 toes of mine are dead till this very day because they froze. There was the shoes that they gave us were very primitive, no leather, just a fabric. Excuse me. From that camp, I was sent to my 3rd camp called Großmasselwitz, also in Germany, where I did stay for 15 months. And again, the conditions are very similar. But there was one episode which happened to me in that camp, which I would like to share with you, which is very important in my life, very important. And again, I appreciate your attentiveness, but I'm pleading with you, listen carefully. When you come home, think about it, and try to analyze that episode. At one point in that camp Großmasselwitz, I worked in a textile factory together with German workers, mostly women, because men were drafted to the army. The German women worked in that part of the factory, operating textile machinery, and we prisoners worked in that part of the factory, dismantling all machines and erecting new machines for the production of ammunition. And there were signs all over the factory in the German language addressed to the German workers. Don't give anything to the prisoners. Don't talk to them. Don't make even eye contact with them. And if you do, you are doomed. One day, while I was sitting there and dismantling a machine, a middle-aged German woman on the way to the restroom from here to here did make eye contact with me. And she hinted to me with her finger like that. I had no idea what she meant. I was very curious. I had a feeling something important. But I had to watch myself that nobody else should notice me approaching that indicated spot. Eventually, I did find the right moment, and what happened? I found a sandwich of 2 slices of white bread with a slice of cheese underneath a box. That German woman repeated that noble act of leaving a sandwich for me every day for 30 days, as long as I worked at that location. I have no yardstick to measure to what extent it helped me to survive, because this was only for 30 days out of 1,050 days that I was incarcerated. But the question here is, why did she do it? Why? She heard on the radio and she read in the paper every day that I am an Untermensch, subhuman, and she is a master race, superior. Why was she willing to risk her life 30 times for a young Jewish boy? What comes to your mind? I'll tell you what comes to my mind. Maybe she had a son at my age and she felt sorry for me. Maybe she was a religious person and she tried to abide by the tenets of her faith to help somebody in need. Maybe she wanted to make a point that not all the Germans were so cruel. I don't know. I never will. But I'm so grateful to this German woman because she taught me a very important lesson. And I'll tell you why. 3 weeks prior to that, a German guard, for no good reason, punched me and knocked out most of my teeth. I have no teeth. These are dentures. He was a German, and she was a German. Both of them were German nationals. But look at the difference. One was wicked, and the other one was mischievous. What did I learn? You are going to find good people and bad people in every group. That prejudice and stereotyping is absurd. I can just tell you that I tried so hard after the war to locate that woman, to thank her. I didn't know her name or her address. All I remembered was the location. So I went back there in 1945 after the war. And I went to City Hall to pleading with them. Please help me to locate a woman that risked her life for me 30 times in 1943. What's her name? What's her address? They looked at me to be insane. How can you locate anybody if you don't know a name or her address? But logic didn't play a role. I just felt the need to thank her. And after the war, I tried everything, and I couldn't recognize her. Even the museums didn't want to accept it because I didn't know her name or her address. And I couldn't honor her until just a few weeks ago. I was invited to South Salem High School. I spoke over there 14 times. And this was the last time that I spoke over there because I'm 90 years old. And they invited me. They gave me a surprise. They erected a monument in honor of that German woman and me for that righteous deed. That German woman risked her life for me 30 times. But it's a very important lesson here. In those 88,000 letters that I received so far, you'll be amazed how many students tell me, Mr. Wiener, I promise you that all my life I'll try to be like that German woman. Obviously, it is very gratifying to me that there's a lesson here. It is not just a lesson in history. It is a lesson about human behavior, how cruel people can be and how righteous some people can be. So from that camp, I was sent to my fourth camp, called Klettendorf, also in Germany. At that time, 1944, the Germans started to lose the war. My job was digging trenches against incoming tanks. One day, digging a trench, I came across a raw potato. I picked up that raw potato and ate, unpeeled. A new arrival from Belgium observed me eating a raw potato, said to me, how in the world can you eat a raw potato? How can you take this humiliation? I just came from Belgium, I had a wife and a child, good business, good parent, I'm not going to take it. And I tried to reason with him. If you would have the experience of 2.5 years camp life the way I had, you would be lucky to find a potato. It tasted better than to eat snow. I used to eat snow in order to survive. You have no idea what starvation means. If you are starving, you will eat anything that you can put your hand on. And he really didn't survive. From that camp, I was sent to my fifth camp, my last camp, called Waldenburg, in Germany, a very isolated area. I didn't see a woman or a child, a flower or a meadow for 8 months. I didn't see my own face. There were no mirrors in that camp. I know it's hard to believe. How can you survive in such kind of environment? Picture yourself. I had hands the way you have hands. I couldn't write. There was nothing to write with or to write on. I had ears the way you have ears. I couldn't listen to the sound of music. All I could listen to was cursing me, yelling at me, shouting at me every day, and telling me that you are no good. I had eyes the way you have eyes. I couldn't read. There was nothing to read. And since there was nothing to read, and we had no books, we had no radio, we had no idea what was going on in the world. So on May the 9th, 1945, we assembled to go to work, like any other day, but the German guards that ordinarily escorted us to our working place didn't show up. And we wondered why. About 1 o'clock, a tank of the Russian army approached our gate, and the officer said, "You are free." So at that point, we realized that the Germans lost the war. When the Russian soldiers noticed our emaciated bodies, they broke down and they cried like babies. And they told us, "Go out to the city of Brandenburg, kill Germans, as many as you want. We are giving you 3 days of freedom. Take revenge, because we know how you feel. We lost 22 million of our own people." I didn't go out to kill. It's not ingrained in me. I could hardly walk. I had a very, very tough time. I didn't know what to do with my freedom. Where do I go? Where do I take strength to walk? Eventually, a German family who lived in that vicinity came to our camp, and one of them offered me to stay in her house until I regained some strength, and that's what I did. And when I did regain some strength, I went back to Poland to see if somebody of my family survived. On those days we had no computers. Even Red Cross couldn't provide you with reliable information, who survived, who did not survive. So I went back to Poland. I did stay in Poland for a few weeks, and only 4 cousins of mine did show up, and 123 members of my extended family, my grandparents, uncles, aunts, cousins, they were all murdered. I'm the only survivor of my immediate family. This is very, very briefly this is how I look soon after the war. In this picture, next to it, I took a few months after my liberation. I just put on the jacket as a souvenir. But you can see the difference, how I look and how I felt. As mentioned before, I got my Honorary Bachelor Degree by Wiener Pacific College, and I was very humbled. I felt very honored. And this was a commencement. There were about 1,000 students and family. And I told them how humbled I am. When I was in camp, I had 2 dreams. One dream was to eat as much bread as I want. Just bread, not bread and butter. To eat as much bread as I want. And to sleep on a mattress. This was one dream. My other dream was to be reunited with my family, which unfortunately did not materialize. But I never dreamt that one day I'm going to be a free person in this blessed country and be honored by such a distinguished audience. This was the commencement. They all became PhDs. So Professor Barber, the president of the college, came to the podium and he said, "Mr. Wiener, I promise you that we PhDs can learn more from your life experience than you can learn from our experience." When I got my Honorary Law Degree from Lewis and Clark just a few years ago, it happened that the dean read my book. And he came to a conclusion that it's a very important book. It gives you a message how to live and how to appreciate your freedom. If you remember at the beginning, I told you why I am making an effort to share my story. There are 3 reasons. The main reason is the feedback that I'm getting from so many people, either those who hear me or those who read my book. The second reason is that there are people who are ignorant about the Holocaust. I come across this all the time. If there is a video or a movie which is called 94 Maidens, and you will see how little people in the United States know about the Holocaust. In that movie, college students are being interviewed. And they don't know anything, not even the meaning of Holocaust. They don't even know who was the President of the United States during the war. They don't know what the genocide means. It is right there. You saw this, right? It's right there. College student. What do you see here? What did the Germans do? They came to our homes. They picked up all the people. The very young who are able to work were sent to concentration camp or labor camp. And the rest, the elderly, the very young, were sent directly to killing centers. There were 6 killing centers in Poland. Auschwitz, Majdanek, Treblinka, were the very young, were sent directly there. My younger brother, at the age of 10, he didn't fit for work. So he was, I found out after the war, that on February 18, 1943, he was sent directly to Auschwitz, and he was murdered there the same day. You see here the people that they picked up. You see the trains to take them to the killing centers. So how can anybody deny the Holocaust? I sent this picture to the president of Iran. The same here. These are shoes taken away from those little children before they're pushed into the gas chambers. These shoes are still there. This picture was taken by an American soldier. Picture yourself how much these little kids suffered. Every day when I take a shower and I look at the shower head, I talk to myself. What went through the mind of my little brother at the age of 10? He was pushed into a gas chamber. He lived there for 3-4 minutes. And then instead water, Cyclone B gas, choked him to death. How much did that little boy suffer? And why? Who had a heart to murder 1.5 million children under the age of 14 in such a brutal way? General Eisenhower gave an order to the American soldiers or generals, take pictures of those liberated camps, because one day somebody might say it didn't happen. Unfortunately, he was correct. There are people today, some people, who say it didn't happen. What did General Eisenhower, Patry, and Bradley, and all the other commanders find in those liberated camps? Mounds and mounds and mounds of dead bodies. And those who are still living were half dead. How can anybody say it didn't happen? In the Nuremberg trial, which lasted from November 1945 till October 46, those German officials, those military commanders, they didn't deny the Holocaust. All what they did say to their defense was, we had to follow Hitler's orders. But they didn't deny the Holocaust. So how can anybody say it did not happen? This is a picture taken by a German soldier while he committed those terrible things in the Ukraine and in Russia. Hundreds of thousands of people were forced to dig their own graves and buried half alive. There's now a priest in France by the name of Patrick Dubois that he dedicates his life to find mass graves in the Ukraine and Russia, and so far he located 860 mass graves of those innocent victims. So how can anybody deny that? This picture was taken by a British soldier in Bergen-Belsen. That is what they found in those liberated camps. Mounds and mounds of dead bodies, and those who were working were half dead. This man in the middle is my schoolmate. This picture was taken one day after the war by an American soldier. That is the way we all looked. And this man in the middle, he died one day after the war. Thousands of Holocaust survivors did die soon after the war because they couldn't digest the normal food given to them by the Americans, the British, and the French. Thousands. And he died one day after the war. This was written by a German clergyman months after the war, when he realized how immoral it was for the entire world not to do more to stop the Holocaust. You know, Winston Churchill, the Prime Minister of Britain, said, the Holocaust was not just a Jewish tragedy, it was the world's tragedy that the world let this happen. I would appreciate if you take a minute and you read this poem in unison. Go ahead. Read it. I can hear you.
For the communists, and I didn't speak up because I wasn't a communist. Then they came for the Jews, and I didn't speak up because I wasn't a Jew. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I didn't speak up because I wasn't a trade unionist. Then they came for the Catholics, and I didn't speak up because I was a Protestant. Then they came for me, and by that time there was no one else to speak for me.
This is not my date, don't misunderstand. This is a German exchange student. She came to my apartment where I live in Hillsboro to interview me. At the door, she told me, you probably hate me. Why should I hate you? Well, my grandfather was a Nazi. But why should I hate you? I don't get it. Are you responsible for your grandfather's action or inaction? That is the way I feel. I have nothing against the new generation of Germans today. They are not guilty. Guilt cannot be inherited. Today I'm not guilty for the actions or inaction of their parents or grandparents. In Getson High School, after my presentation, a student approached me. She said to me, I heard you, but I didn't see you. Initially, I didn't get what she meant, but the principal was sitting next to me, told me that girl is legally blind. So she heard you, but she didn't see you. And then I got an email from her. I don't know how she operates in school. And that email, she tells me, you changed my life. How did I change your life? Well, I mentioned in my presentation that under Hitler, any baby that was born with any kind of disability was murdered by the doctors and the nurses. Hitler gave an order to all the hospitals that an infant is born with any kind of health problems, murder it, because I don't want to have any sick people in Germany. 250,000 German babies were murdered by the doctors and the nurses. The same doctors, when they graduated from medical school, they gave the Hippocratic oath that they will be compassionate. They became murderers. So the school decided to have a play based on my life story, and here you can see that she has a vision problem, and here she's playing a role of one of the inmates in that camp. Wherever I go to speak, especially middle school or high school, I suggest to the teacher to invite parents. And one of the middle schools right here in Portland, one of the parents was Trudy Ludwig. Trudy Ludwig is a very well-known author of children's book. And when she heard the episode of the German woman who is the life for me, she decided to write a book about it. And she did write a book which is called Gift from the Enemy. And apparently it's a very good book because it's being translated now into German. So I have a few copies here that she gave me. If somebody interested, you can buy that book. So basically this is more or less my story. I mean, I could tell you from days and nights, be here, but you get the basic message. what tolerance means, what cruelty means, and that the Holocaust did indeed happen. And if somebody ever tries to tell you it did not happen, you will know what to tell him. So, as mentioned before, there are very few Holocaust survivors left, very few. I'm still here because I am busy, yet I have no time to die. It is a very important message here. So if you have any questions for me, you're welcome.
What personal characteristics of your own do you think contributed to your survival?
It's a very good question, but I have no clear-cut answer. I just don't know. It's a combination. What I do know is that I wanted to survive. I was so young. In the first camp, Blechame, I was the youngest child over there. I wanted to live. I didn't know what that life is all about. I just was afraid to die. And maybe plain luck. It's a combination of many factors. When I spoke on Channel 2 the other day, about 2 years ago, the interviewer asked me a simple question. How did you survive and not your brother? Don't you have a guilt feeling that you're only survivor of your family? I don't have a guilt feeling. I'm not comfortable. But I have no clear-cut answer. The only thing, you see, there were people over there. We had no means to kill ourselves. To kill yourself, you need a weapon or a rope or something. We didn't even eat packets. We had no possessions. The only way I could do was to stop eating altogether. Or in the last camp, I could approach an electrified fence and touch it and be electrocuted. But I just didn't have the courage to do it. So basically, I don't have a clear-cut answer, but thank you for the question.
Have you ever heard back from the president of Iran?
From the president of Iran? No, he never wrote to me. All I can tell you is that I made an effort. I went to the post office. I paid $30 just to send it to him. But he didn't. What is he going to tell me if he does? Maybe he did read the book later on. I have no idea. All I did, I put on the address the president, Ahmadinejad, the president of Iran, Tehran, Iran. I didn't know exactly the address. He probably did get it.
There was the episode when a German businessman pulled you out of the line. Did you ever get to meet him again?
No, I didn't meet him. All what he did, you see, the way the German economy worked was a free enterprise system. He was an entrepreneur. He needed manpower to operate in his factory or whatever. So he saw in me that I'm still able to contribute, so he picked me up. But they didn't pay me for anything, you see, and I didn't meet him. I don't even know his name. That is the way the system worked. He just noticed that I'm still able to work, even though I didn't feel it has any strength. But what happened at the very end of the war, especially April, May, till they capitulated, they were missing manpower. Because all the men were drafted to the army. The situation of the German at that point was very, very poor. And they needed manpower to operate the economy. So anybody was able. He felt in me that I'm still able to contribute to something to the German economy. So he sent me back to work.
In the current status of this country, do you see cause for hope or cause for concerns?
Very good question, and I'm very, very concerned. In fact, they asked me the same question on Channel 2 when I was interviewed. Why am I so concerned? Because when we were liberated, we said, oh, that's the end of evil. But what happened since then? You don't remember maybe, it was Biafra, Rwanda, Kosovo, many little Holocausts. It's very concerned. And my main concern is that the means of destruction today are much more powerful than the means of destruction in World War II. In World War II, to kill 6 million Jews, there was a big operation. Today, with one small envelope, of biological or chemical device, you can kill millions of people within a very short time. So there is room for concern. And besides, the ISIS, for example, if you watch the news, you know who they are. They are adapting Hitler's techniques. They are reading his book now, Mein Kampf, or The Struggle, and try to adapt his tactics. That is the reason that they are beheading people on television to frighten the people. That's exactly what Hitler did. So I'm very concerned about the future.
In your hometown, were there others who were not victims, who were trying to help?
All the Jews, there's only one Jew left in that town. There was one day of final liquidation. That's the reason I know that my stepmother and my younger brother were picked up on February 18, 1943. Where they wiped out everybody. Every Jew in that little town had to report, and they were deported. This was your question? Did I answer your question?
I was wondering what the Germans in that town, if they did anything or you had an interaction with them at that time.
If there were Germans in your hometown or others who were not Jewish, did they try to help?
Well, very good question. There are cases of Poles or Christians who risked their life for another neighbor, a Jewish man. But in general, it was quite a lot of Poles who did corroborate with the Germans. If this was the answer to your question. Yeah. In my book, you'll find in a page a friend of mine who was hidden by a Polish family of 12 people for the duration of the entire war. By doing so, they risked their own lives of 12 people to hide a young Jewish boy. So there are Poles, good Poles, and bad Poles. So that's my point. You're going to find good people and bad people in every course. Take the German woman who risked her life for me 30 times. Why? Because she had a conscience. She was a good person.
He wanted to know what character traits your friend had, the friend from the picture.
The classmate.
The classmate, the one who died after he was liberated. He wanted to know what type of person he was, what traits.
Well, we went together to school. What do I remember as a little kid? All I know is it hurt that somebody suffered so much and he had to die soon after the war. There are many books on that subject. What happened is, unfortunately, the American, the British, and the French, they didn't know that you cannot give a hamburger to somebody who had been deprived of basic nutrients for a long time. The body is not going to digest it. This was a very, very sad. You know why? They didn't teach nutrition in medical schools until 30 years ago. That is a very pity. People who survived the Holocaust had to die soon after the war. It's very, very painful. If I may ask you, did you learn anything today? You made an effort to come here. What did you learn? Tell me. Don't be bashful.
She learned through your story of how the Germans would enjoy watching people suffer, but also the German woman who helped you survive, that you can't just judge an entire people one way.
That's very true. Thank you for your comment. But I can tell you, there is a lesson here. I'll give you just 2 episodes which I experienced not a long time ago. And this happened in Woodbury. There's a prison of young people, juveniles. And at the end of my presentation, one of them approached me in front of all the other prisoners. And that's what he said. Mr. Wiener, if I would have heard you when I was a teenager, I wouldn't be here. I wonder, why did he say that? Well, when I was a teenager, whatever I had was not enough. So I decided to hold up somebody and take his money. So he did. But the man resisted him, so he took out his knife, stabbed him, and killed him. And he was sentenced to life. Why did I do it, he said. I had everything at your age that you didn't have. Why did I do it? How stupid was I? What did I gain by it? He had no money anyway, and I was caught and sent to life. There's a message here. I went to a prison in Salem. There's a penitentiary of 2,000 men. And one of them came at the end, he said to me, if I would have heard your story 30 years ago, when I was liberated, when I was from Vietnam, I wouldn't have done what I did. I would be satisfied with what I had, and I wouldn't have dealt in drugs. Now I've been here, sentenced for life. Why? The point here is that you have to appreciate how precious freedom is, how precious education is. You can say whatever you want. Do you realize how precious personal freedom is? There's a book written by an American, not a Holocaust survivor. It's called The Third Reich at War. And he documents a handwritten letter by a German soldier writing to his wife, darling, how are your kids? I don't think we are going to win the war. By this sentence, I don't think we are going to win the war, he was executed. You couldn't say in Germany, I hate Hitler. You would be killed. You can go out and say, I hate Obama or I hate Bush. Nothing is going to happen to you. Freedom of expression is so precious. You have to appreciate what you have. You know, Plato said 2,500 years ago, an appreciative mind is a great mind. You have to realize how good your life is and to appreciate.
Your story and experience reminds him, encourages him to never give up.
Very good. Never give up. Even if you, when I was young, I never gave up to fight. If I wanted a girl, I got her. I do the same today. You know, you remind me the other day I went to McMinnville to a high school, and I put my hand on the shoulder of a female teacher just to draw her attention. So one of the students stands up, he said, Mr. Wiener, you are flirting with my teacher. So, innocent me, I'm flirting with your teacher? How old are you? 18. So look, when I was 18, I couldn't flirt. I was in concentration camp. Let me catch up at one point in my life.
What brought you to Hillsboro?
Well, first of all, let me assure you, I am a legal immigrant. If this was bothered you. My son lived here, and he brought me over here, but now he moved to Seattle. And the people are very nice here, and in general, in Oregon, Beaverton. Do you know Beaverton Bakery? Yeah. Okay. The other day I bought sometimes, I bought over there something, and this was a Tuesday. On a Tuesday, they give you a discount if you are a senior citizen. So I went there on a Tuesday, and she did not give me a discount. So I told her, today is Tuesday, aren't you going to give me a discount? No, this is only for senior citizens.
How old were your children when you felt you could first talk to them about the Holocaust and your experience?
I didn't have to talk to them, because when we associated with other people, I lived in New York, most of them, 99% were other Holocaust survivors. And all what we talked about was about our experience during the war. So they overheard what we were talking about. But it's not so easy. It is very, very difficult. Some Holocaust survivors have children, they don't want to know anything about it. and which is unfortunate because you do have to know your heritage. As in fact, the very good books on that topic, that children of today, even of World War II veterans, are angry now that their grandparents didn't talk to them about what they went through. Now they are no longer here. They have questions for them, but they cannot ask them. And then what I'm trying to do, what I'm doing basically to convince to have teaching the Holocaust mandatory in the state of Oregon. There are only 6 states in the United States, like New York, Florida, California, that teaching the Holocaust is mandatory. Unfortunately, all the rest of the United States, that's not the case. And I gave you an example, if you ever have a chance to watch that video, 94 millions, it is about how little college students know about the Holocaust.
In light of your concerns for the future, what are ideas, suggestions for us to keep that from happening in our country?
It's a very good question. I'm concerned about it. I don't have a solution. All I do know is we have to teach our children at home and in the school that prejudice doesn't make any sense. And then there's no prejudice. Thank you. You know, the DNA, 98% of humans have the same DNA. Do you realize that? 98% of humans all over the world have the same DNA. So what does it make us different? How does what's happening now in Iraq or Syria or all those in the Middle East, what right do they have to say if you are not a Sunni Muslim, you have no right to live? You are an infidel, and it's my religious duty to eliminate you. That is basically what they say. So my point is, I'm not a professor and I'm not a philosopher. I just understand from my life experience that prejudice and stereotyping doesn't make any sense. What we have to teach and drill into the mind of the young that we are all God's children. Thank you. Can I tell you something on a lighter note? I went to a high school and the student asked me, "How old are you?" So I gave him my age. "How come you live so long? You suffered so much?" "I don't know. God knows. All I can tell you is I give you my lifestyle. I don't smoke, I don't drink alcohol, I'm a vegetarian. This might be one of the reasons that I'm still here." "Are you telling me that you have no vices?" "Vices? Okay, I have 2 vices. I like chocolate and women." So he said, "Me too." The following year, I was invited to the same school, and the teacher, the female teacher, presented me with a bar of chocolate. And she said to me, "I remember from last year your 2 vices. I can satisfy you with 1 vice only. But if you come next year, we shall see." She gave me hope.
I know that it's difficult to reminisce and talk about your story, but in writing your book and in talking, in making these presentations, how does that help you? Has that helped you emotionally?
It's a very good question, but if you remember, the reason that I wrote that book is because that World War II veteran pleaded with me, do it for my children, for my grandchildren. So this became a moral obligation. Then you just forget about all the other. I had another obstacle. I didn't know the language. I still don't know English very well. But I gave it a try. I promised, you keep your promise. In our tradition, not keeping a promise is a sin. And I didn't want to sin. Under one sin, I mentioned before, this is woman. Otherwise, there's no sin.
Would you thank him for coming?
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.